Welcome out to a recap. Oh, actually, I'm going to start again because I'm going to get my screen up because I don't actually have my screen up. Okay. So you're going to get the whole play here, and then we'll come back with the guys. Welcome out to a recap of our weekly Dungeons and Dragons show, Sunforged. This is our second campaign with the same group of players, but a new story, a new set of characters, and a new continent to explore. This recap is intended to catch you up to episode 7, and each one will be told in groups of 7. So sit back and enjoy as you catch up on Sunforged. We open in a town. A group of would-be adventurers are being served and welcomed by an innkeeper. A hooded, shadowy figure lurks in the corner before standing and revealing its ethereal form of darkness. The whole town is swallowed up by shadowed tendrils that plummet it into the earth. The land seals over. Time passes, and we're introduced to a knight named Kittic, accompanied by our first character, Sir Morgaine.
You would see a human woman, also chainmail with a robe covering, packing up a bedroll, and folding up a parchment that seems important and tucking it inside the robe.
Sir Morgaine's heading is a town named Crownheart Hall. There is to be a festival to honor the last day of summer. This is where the party shall meet for the first time. The current year is 499 of the Third Dawn on the continent of Hyloma. Nearly 500 years ago, marking the beginning of this age, was the creation of the Sunforged. It was designed to replicate the dawning and setting of the sun. Once, the land was alight by the power of the Lux Well, from the morning till the evening, never truly getting dark either, always in a state of twilight at night. 13 houses descended from angelic beings, celestials born of Kyva, the sun goddess. Her gift to this land was a well of light that would keep darkness at bay, and it did, until an arrogant king, the final monarch of Hyloma, decided to use reality magic to tear a sun from a false world. The power he attempted was beyond him, and he devastated portions of the land. The houses went into civil war and fought for 100 blessings, until, eventually, the monarchy fell. 4 decades of darkness occurred, until the Sunforge was built. Each house controls a region, and is not unlike a monarch themselves. There are many lesser houses, always pining for the power their superiors hold. House Lepos, one of those houses, are the rulers of Crownheart Hall. They invited guests from across the continent. We are next introduced to one of those guests who's been living with them for some time, Lady Zonia.
You would see a very tall woman with beautiful curly blonde hair, and she's glowing in a way that everyone in this land would know only Aasimar do. And she looks a bit restless. She's kind of pacing around. Seems like she wants to be doing something else.
Traveling into the town from a lengthy trek is an aged turtle named Iridot, and 2 folk she brought from the unconquered lands of the far north. We are introduced to our next 2 characters, Carlisle and V.
Very sort of clumsily, as he's carrying a lot of supplies that he didn't expect to have to grab so quickly, a tall, relatively broad-billed male hobgoblin with a powerful mustache and very clean-ish white clothing and a lot of medical tools strapped to him every which way, is Carlisle Davenport.
You see emerge from the wagon a very pale, small, like 5'2" looking woman rather, with long moth antenna. She's wearing all white, dressed as if she came from somewhere snowy and cold. And the ends of her hair look tainted from red or pink. If you were to look closer, you'd realize it was blood. And her pupils are huge at this point as she steps off and is taken by everything around her. And she stands to the side and waits for her partner, who was in the wagon, to come out. She's very stiff in posture, very proper.
The festival is in high spirits in the town, and the three of them look for entry into the castle. Along the way, passing by some of the festivities, we meet someone telling a story. Our next character, Desmond.
You'll see a figure. You can't see any part of him. All you see is a wide, dark brimmed hat and a duster. He's sitting, one of his feet propped up on the knee of his other leg, swirling a glass of a drink that he clearly can't drink because you'll see his face and he's a full automaton. And the crowd is silent right now, and he's silent. There's anticipation.
On the other end of the town, coming in through the noble's entrance, is a Lord Felus Latrella. This nobleman comes from afar, and in his carriage, he sits talking with his accompaniment. Our final party member is introduced. Indrasa.
A figure, skin the color of like bones bleached in the sun. Her hair is jet black, and it's swept up into this like very elaborate and really ridiculously perfect updo. She stands generally about 5'10", but she's about 6 feet tall right now. She's very willowy, and her posture is like what's more straight than like ramrod straight. Like it would not be straighter. Her gown is glittering black at the bottom, and tendrils of this black kind of rise up from the hem in a really unsettling way, like, I don't know, horror stories of tentacles creeping out of like darkness or the depths of just somewhere. Maybe worse than that.
Each of the group attends the ball happening in the castle, enjoying the festivities and meeting over in a quieter corner. They exchange pleasantries between them and introduce themselves before the feast begins. In the grand hall, food from across the land is served, but is cruelly interrupted by cultists. They are disguised as servants and begin attacking the guests, killing several. In the center of the room, an Ankheg statue comes alive by one of the cultists who is cackling in the center, and destroys, consuming one of the servants, named Forvana. But her body does not collapse as anybody would, but instead turns to dust, to ash, and the town ripples as if traveling through a bubble. Suddenly, an unworldly creature drops from the ceiling onto the Ankhead and begins eating it. Guests, nobles, and our soon-to-be heroes fight for their lives. And during the fight, Zonia, who is a guest living in Crown Art Hall, and promised to one of the sons of the Lord, shifts their form, revealing they are in fact a changeling, named Tak.
Zonia is going to reach out and like tug on this person, bringing them kind of under the table with them and start undressing them. And while it's happening, the glow of her starts to flicker out, almost like a light bulb. Mm-hmm. And the bright pink of her eyes sort of drips out to show like a silvery white. And the curly hair becomes straight and dark, and she noticeably gets a bit smaller. And is not Zonia at all.
After the feast, the wounded are tended to whilst our party decides to investigate the situation. The entire town now seemed to have many more of these creatures and other parasite-like monsters. Indrasa was familiar with the magic that caused the creatures to appear. Reality magic. She frantically explained how the town of Crown Hall was now within a reality bubble. Forbidden magic, which the creator can design monsters of their imagination to defend. Inside these reality shifts, they might hide their treasures or secrets, but all bubbles have an anchor. The two ways to return the town to the true world would be to destroy or retrieve the anchor. Equally, Sir Morgaine was familiar with the head cultist, a tiefling named Chaos. Sir Morgaine was former a place called the Dread Vault, a prison for the most wanted and dangerous, and he was on her list. After descending through the kitchens, filled with the bodies of the servants killed by the cultists, our newly formed party fought their way through the streets of the town toward the center. There, they found a cultist performing a ritual to the skinless god upon a woman. In this confrontation, she used immense magic to shield herself from those around her, as the party started to confront Chaos. Chaos escaped, leaving 3 of his remaining followers to morph their skin into one greater being to attack the party. They killed it, and reached the lady in the center, finding out she was the anchor all along. She grabbed hold of them and teleported them out of there. They awoke in a field, surrounded by a woodland, far from their original location. They found themselves in the Strife Lands, a couple of regions over, many, many miles from where they once began. The lady that had teleported them was comatose and not seemingly waking up, and a passerby, a sister of the House of Silhouettes, named Abigail, recognized her and took the party in. They learned that they had not simply teleported, but in fact 3 days had passed in that time they traveled. The House of Silhouettes was a safe haven for those looking to disappear. Upon entry, you speak words of magic and you appear only as a silhouette to other attendees of the house. The group used this as a base to figure out what they wanted to do next. Sister Abigail agreed to look after the girl, but could not tell them much about who she was, only that it had been a century since they had last seen her. They learned of a town capable of moving that was stationed nearby, Sigrat. They journeyed toward the town with Abigail and another sister of her older, Sister Valis. On the road, they found signs of an attack and snuck off the road into the woods to see what had caused it. They found a group of gnolls, hyena creatures that cackle and walk on hind legs, tormenting a young captive soldier. The party killed them and freed the lad. He revealed himself to be Danyik and spoke of the knights he travelled with after the gnolls, being taken further into the woods. But wanting to be sure they were ready, our heroes continued onward to the town of Sigrat. Sigrat was a series of peculiar buildings built up of different materials from across the continent. During their stay here, they visited various shops, including a magical one, meeting its owner, Master Vandervol of the Spell Counter. And right on this plinth, right in the center of the room, on the second portion of the actual shop itself, you can see this great big fat toad that almost looks flattened, and it wears a wizard robe and a little hat on the top as well, all with kind of like stars that kind of gleam and glow, and shine like different colors around it. And just kind of watches some of the customers. It's like kind of white beard that's kind of been trimmed down around his face. Larger on the moustache area, though, because it kind of like pulls out like the moustache. It has deep set blue waves across it. Almost the same way like grey hairs in my beard, but it's with kind of this deep set blue. You see on his head, he has the same kind of swept shoulder length hair. It looks as if it's kind of like the color of rain cloud on a summer's day. It's kind of like almost stormy in his hair as it pulls down. His skin is this soft blue, that of an air genasi. He wears long, kind of fashionable robes adorned with all sorts of colors all across him. His sleeves go bright, like kind of wider and like wide set, and kind of most magically don't attach to the skin at the end. His robes kind of glance across the ground. He steps through, and you'd see noticeably on his wrists, he has these kind of like chains connected to all these different colors. This kind of almost magical device on one hand. He steps in and goes, "Richard, I told you not to fucking disturb." In the town, they also picked up a few bounties. One would hunt down mutant spiders, another to hunt down a basilisk fish, and the last had them meet the town leader, Salandriel. This Shader Kai had stolen an orb from the Shadowfell and repurposed it to allow his entire town to be teleported from region to region, covering hundreds of miles at a time. Unfortunately for him, it had been stolen recently, and they had been trapped in this location for some time. The group agreed to retrieve it, being promised transportation to a region of their choice if they succeeded. The next morning, the party set out with Danyik to deal with the rest of the Gnoll band. In the woodlands, they came across a ritual site. The gnolls had found reddened crystals that were petrified blood of a demon that once nested there. They were using the blood to transform captives into momentary demons so that they might have their hyenas feast upon the flesh and transform into a far more ferocious, somewhat demonic form in their transition to gnoll. Disrupting the ritual and killing off the gnoll band, including the last captive knight who had been transformed into the demon by an elixir, the group decided to investigate the area. Among a magical blade, they also discovered a child gnoll and decided to put it down. It scampered away before they got the chance, though. Perhaps it will remember that. This gnoll camp had been the first quest this adventuring party had completed together. They had many more to come. By episode 7, the party had undertaken the task of hunting down the basilisk fish, a ferocious creature that had been eating local fishermen in a lake not far from Sigrat. With the promise of gold and an unbreakable fishing rod and line, the heroes made quick work of the fish and set their eyes on the spider cave. That is the end of this recap, and you've been caught up from episode 1 through to 7.